The current carried her downstream, lungs burning for air, fingers desperately clutching the small boy's shirt as darkness threatened to take them both. Maria never expected to find herself fighting for two lives that summer afternoon, nor did she imagine how this single act of courage would entangle her with one of the most dangerous men in the city.
If you enjoying incredible true story, brave fate and expected connection, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary tales and remind us how can change in an instant.
The Allegheny River glittered under the July sun, deceptively peaceful from where Maria Cortez sat grading papers. At 32, she had perfected the art of multitasking, enjoying the park while catching up on work from her 6th grade class. Summer school kept her busy, but these moments of solitude by the water were sacred. A splash caught her attention, followed by a frantic cry that made her blood run cold. "Help! My son! Please, he can't swim." Maria's head snapped up to see a man pointing frantically toward the water where a small dark head bobbed momentarily before disappearing beneath the surface. Without hesitation, she kicked off her shoes and dove. The current was stronger than it appeared, the water colder and murkier. Her teacher's salary had never covered swimming lessons, but growing up with 3 brothers near Lake Erie had made her confident enough in water. She pushed forward, eyes stinging as she searched the murky depths. There, a flash of blue. The boy's t-shirt. She lunged, fingers grasping fabric, pulling the small body toward her. His eyes were closed, face terrifyingly still. Maria kicked upward, one arm wrapped around the child's chest, fighting the current that seemed determined to claim them both. Breaking the surface, she gasped for air, struggling to keep the boy's face above water. The shore seemed impossibly far. Her muscles screamed in protest as she fought her way toward land, inch by excruciating inch. "I've got you," she whispered to the unconscious child. "Just hold on." By the time hands reached down to pull them from the water, Maria's vision was swimming with exhaustion. She collapsed onto the grass, watching through blurred vision as the father immediately began CPR on his son. "Come on, Luca. Please, buddy. Please." The desperate prayer in the man's voice broke something in Maria's heart. She pushed herself up on trembling arms, water streaming from her clothes, and watched as the small chest suddenly heaved. The boy coughed violently, water spilling from his mouth as he drew in ragged breaths. The father's sob of relief was primal, raw with emotion as he gathered his son into his arms. Only then did Maria notice the crowd that had gathered, the wail of approaching sirens. And only then did she truly see the man whose son she had saved, tall, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold shadows deeper than the river itself. His expensive watch glinted in the sunlight, at odds with his casual clothes. Something about him made her instinctively wary, even as he turned those intense eyes toward her. "You saved my son's life," he said, voice rough with emotion. "I'm Daniel. Daniel Russo." The name meant nothing to her then. 3 days later, Maria returned to her small apartment after a grueling day of summer school to find an enormous bouquet of flowers outside her door. The card simply read, "Thank you. Daniel and Luca Russo." How had he found her address? She hadn't given him her name, though she supposed someone in the crowd might have recognized her. Still, the gesture unsettled her almost as much as it touched her. The following day brought another gift, a small, elegantly wrapped package containing a silver pendant of Saint Christopher, patron saint of travelers. The note read, "To protect you, as you protected him." By the 3rd day, when a courier delivered an envelope containing tickets to the symphony, her favorite orchestra, though she'd never told him that, Maria decided enough was enough. She called the number on the card. "Mr. Russo, this is Maria Cortez. The gifts are very kind, but unnecessary. Please, call me Daniel." His voice was warm, disarming. "And they're entirely necessary. My son is alive because of you. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't. You did." A pause. Would you allow Luca and me to thank you properly? Dinner, perhaps? Maria hesitated. There was something about Daniel Russo that both attracted and alarmed her. But the thought of seeing the boy again, of knowing he was truly okay, tipped the scales. Just dinner, she agreed. The restaurant was far more upscale than anywhere Maria had ever dined. Daniel arrived with 8-year-old Luca, who immediately wrapped his arms around Maria's waist. "Dad says you're my guardian angel," the boy said, face pressed against her stomach. Maria's heart melted as she knelt to his level. "I'm just glad you're okay, Luca." Over dinner, she learned that Daniel was a widower. His wife had died when Luca was just 3. He ran import businesses, though he remained vague about specifics. Luca was bright, precocious, and clearly adored his father, who in turn seemed devoted to his son. What Maria didn't notice was how the restaurant staff deferred to Daniel with a mixture of respect and fear. How conversations at nearby tables hushed when he walked past. How the manager himself served their table, refusing to allow anyone else near them. But she did notice the gun beneath the jacket of the man who had driven them to the restaurant, who now sat at a nearby table, vigilant eyes scanning the room. "Your friend seems very protective," she observed carefully as Daniel walked her to her door later that night, Luca having fallen asleep in the car under the watchful eye of the driver. Daniel's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Force of habit in my line of work." "And what work is that, exactly?" "I told you. Imports, exports. Family business." "What family?" Something shuddered in his expression. "The Russo family. We've been in Pittsburgh for generations." The name tickled something in Maria's memory, a headline, perhaps, or a whispered conversation. But before she could place it, Daniel leaned in and kissed her cheek, his lips lingering just a moment too long. "Thank you again, Maria. For everything." She watched him walk away, unable to shake the feeling that she had just stepped into something far more complicated than a simple rescue. The next morning, Maria's colleague Sophia cornered her in the teacher's lounge. "Tell me you're not dating Daniel Russo," she hissed, eyes wide with alarm. "I'm not dating anyone," Maria replied, confused. "I had dinner with him and his son. The boy I pulled from the river." Sophia grabbed Maria's arm, pulling her into an empty classroom. "Do you have any idea who he is? The Russos run half the criminal enterprises in this city. Drugs, gambling, protection rackets. His father was Antonio Russo, they called him the Butcher of Pittsburgh." Maria felt the blood drain from her face. "That's ridiculous. He's just a businessman. A single dad. A single dad who took over the family business when his father was gunned down 3 years ago. Maria, these people are dangerous. Whatever connection you think you have with him, end it. Now." But ending it proved impossible when Luca appeared at her summer school classroom the following week, clutching a handmade card and begging her to come to his baseball game. How could she refuse those earnest eyes, so full of hope? How could she explain to an 8-year-old that his father's world was too dangerous for a 6th-grade teacher? So she went to the game, telling herself it was for Luca, not for the way Daniel's face lit up when he saw her in the stands. Not for the warmth that spread through her chest when he sat beside her, their shoulders touching as they cheered Luca's team to victory. "He hasn't been this happy since his mother died," Daniel told her quietly as they watched Luca celebrate with his teammates. "You've given him something I couldn't." "What's that?" "Hope." Daniel's eyes, when they met hers, held none of the darkness she'd been warned about. "And maybe you've given that to me too." Summer faded into fall, and despite every warning, every red flag, Maria found herself drawn deeper into the Russos' world. Dinners became regular occurrences. She helped Luca with his homework. She learned that Daniel read poetry, played the piano, and could discuss art and literature with surprising depth. But there were moments that reminded her of who he really was, the hushed phone calls he took in another room, the men who always seemed to be nearby, watching. The way conversations stopped when they entered certain restaurants. "Why me?" she asked him one night as they walked along the river where they'd first met. "You could have anyone." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. "Because you jumped into that river without a thought for yourself. Because you see Luca for who he is, not for who I am. Because when you look at me, I believe I could be better than what my father made me." He kissed her then, and Maria knew she was falling into a current far more dangerous than the river had been. The first real glimpse of Daniel's world came on a crisp October evening. They were leaving a restaurant when a man approached, words slurring with alcohol and anger. "Russo," he spat. "Your father killed my brother. Did you think I'd forget?" Before Maria could process what was happening, Daniel had pushed her behind him. The man lunged, something glinting in his hand. There was a blur of movement, a sickening crack, and the man was on the ground, Daniel's driver standing over him, expression cold. "Get her out of here," Daniel ordered, voice transformed into something hard and unfamiliar. "Now." Later, in her apartment, Daniel tried to explain. "There are people who want to hurt me, hurt Luca, because of my father's actions. Because of who we are." "And who are you, really?" Maria asked, hands still trembling. Daniel's eyes met hers, unflinching. "I'm a man trying to protect what's mine. A man trying to change things, but change comes slowly in my world. Your world of crime and violence. My world of family obligations and survival." He took her hands. "I was born into this life, Maria. I didn't choose it. But I am choosing how to change it, for Luca's sake. For a future that could include you, if you're brave enough to stay." The threats escalated as winter descended on Pittsburgh. Maria found her tires slashed, a crude warning painted on her apartment door. Daniel insisted on moving her to a secure building, on providing protection she didn't want but increasingly needed. "This is what loving me costs," he told her grimly. "I should never have brought you into this." But it was too late. She had fallen in love not just with Luca, but with Daniel, the man who read bedtime stories with different voices for each character, who remembered how she took her coffee, who looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. The breaking point came just before Christmas. Maria was shopping for gifts with Luca, Daniel's men following at a discreet distance, when gunshots shattered the holiday music. People screamed, scattered. One of Daniel's men fell. Another pushed Maria and Luca to the floor, covering them with his body. Later, at the hospital where the injured bodyguard had been taken, Maria confronted Daniel. "This can't go on," she said, voice shaking. "Luca could have been killed today." Daniel's face was ashen. "I know. You said you wanted to change things. Prove it." His eyes, when they met hers, were resolute. "I will. But I need time." The next 3 months passed in a blur of clandestine meetings, hushed conversations, and mounting tension. Maria learned that Daniel had been working with federal authorities, providing evidence against rival families, against corrupt officials, even against members of his own organization. He was dismantling the empire his father had built, piece by dangerous piece. "If they discover what I'm doing, they'll kill me," he told her one night. "But it's the only way Luca can have a normal life. The only way we can have a future." The final move came on a rainy April evening. Maria sat with Luca in a safe house, heart in her throat as she waited for news. When Daniel finally arrived, he was accompanied by federal agents. "It's done," he said simply. "The indictments are coming down tonight. Dozens of arrests. The Russo family as it existed is finished." "And you?" Maria asked, hardly daring to hope. "Immunity, in exchange for my testimony. A new identity for us. A new beginning." He knelt before her. "If you'll come with us." 5 years later, Maria stood on the porch of their lakeside home, watching as Daniel, now known as David Collins, taught Luca to cast a fishing line. Their daughter, 3-year-old Sophia, played at her feet. The transition hadn't been easy. There had been trials, testimonies, the constant fear of retribution. They had moved 3 times before settling here, far from Pittsburgh, in a small town where no one knew the name Russo. Daniel had used his legitimate business skills to start a consulting firm. Maria had found a position teaching at the local elementary school. They had married quietly, with only Luca as witness. There were still nightmares, still moments when Daniel's eyes darkened with memories of the life he'd left behind. But there was peace too, hard-won and precious. As she watched her family by the water, Maria thought about the day she dove into the river to save a drowning boy. How that single moment of courage had changed everything. How sometimes the most dangerous currents led to the safest harbors. Daniel looked up, catching her eye, and smiled, the smile of a man who had found redemption in the love of a woman brave enough to dive into troubled waters. Life doesn't always give us clear choices between right and wrong, good and evil. Sometimes the most beautiful stories emerge from the most unlikely beginnings. Sometimes a single act of courage can change not just one life, but many. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more tales of extraordinary courage and unexpected love. Remember that every day offers us opportunities to dive in and make a difference. You never know where that current might take you.